The push to eliminate real natural meat using fake data is getting endorsed by the highest officials in the United States government now, and the typical American taxpayer will be paying for all of this potentially misanthropic programs that probably won't work to solve a problem that may or may not be real, even by the admission of the government itself. That shouldn't be surprising, and it really isn't. What is surprising is that for those who work tirelessly to solve what I have to call here on YouTube the thermometer problem, they're hostile to the real solution. And the real solution is regenerative ranching, a practice that I want to cover more going forward because it is important to know where our food comes from and how to defend our food, real human food, from people who want to replace it with some highly processed garbage made in a laboratory somewhere that isn't even really fit for human consumption. This story should hit home for anyone on a carnivore or animal-based diet. From Newsweek, we get this report. The U.S. government, at direction of the president, is backing lab-grown meat. That's wonderful news, I'm sure, to the braver among you who trust the scientific establishment more than I have ever trusted them. Let's see what Newsweek is reporting. Quote, the president has said that his administration is formally backing biotechnology, which includes new developments such as lab-grown meat. In an executive order, he said that the U.S. government is dedicated to investing in biotechnology that will advance the U.S.'s food security, with the documents acknowledging the promise of, quote, cultivating alternative food resources and looking to improve food security and drive agricultural innovation through new technologies, including foods made with cultured lab animal cells. Lab-grown meat is considered to be the future of meat production in the face of the thermometer issues. Traditional cattle and other livestock farming produce a huge amount of carbon dioxide during the supply chain, in addition to the methane released by the animals themselves in their burps. Yeah, they went there. They went to cow farts. Methane is also a greenhouse gas and traps more than 25 times more heat per molecule than carbon dioxide. The global industry is on the cusp of a revolution powered by biotechnology, said a senior administrative official in a press conference announcing the executive order. Analyses, in fact, suggest that before the end of the decade, engineering biology holds the potential to be used in manufacturing industries that account for more than 1/3 of global output. That's equivalent to almost $30 trillion in terms of value. There's the real reason they're doing this, folks. $30 trillion in value. Lab-grown meat has been cultivated in a lab by growing animal cells into fully developed tissues. No animals have died or been farmed in the process of making it. End quote. Cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. Money. Some lovely propaganda there too, by the way. Animal agriculture is not responsible for any problems that they say we're having. Plus, did you notice the ethical argument they're making? No animals were harmed in the cultivation of this frankenfood. Maybe someone should go show them the Lion King again, the great circle of life. But are you brave enough to try cultured animal cells? A lab-grown ribeye? Do you trust the regulatory organizations to tell us that this is in fact safe for human consumption? Because they've done such a great job these last couple of years, haven't they? I'm legitimately curious about your opinion on that, so let me know in the comments, please. I, for one, am not brave enough to try it, though. If my choices in life were only veganism, eating the bugs, or eating that stuff, and I had no access to the inevitable underground selling of real meat, the lab-cultured stuff would be the best of the three options, probably. But that's not exactly saying much either. The bar for that's really low. That having been said, though, the article goes on to point out a rather obvious flaw. This isn't going to reduce emissions caused by cattle agriculture. This will probably cause increased emissions, not less. Quote, however, it's uncertain if the temperature impacts of the lab meat biotechnology industry will lead to fewer emissions overall. A 2019 study from the University of Oxford warned that the energy used to grow meat could release more greenhouse gases than cattle farming. In some scenarios, cultivated meat had a higher thermometer effect, and in some scenarios, a lower effect, depending on consumption levels. Expected energy use for cultivated meat and the beef cattle system it was compared to. Paul Helsinke, a researcher at the Netherlands-based sustainability consultancy CE Delft, told Science Focus. There's the possibility to use that land for plant-based protein production, nature and extra renewable energy production, which in turn influences the CO2 emissions of cultivated meat, Sink said. End quote. So yeah, they wanted to replace cattle grazing land with plant-based protein production, which isn't going to work anyway. But it's nice to know that our leaders are throwing tax money at something that may or may not work to solve a problem that may or may not be real, and that their solution may or may not be safe for humans to consume directly. Instead of giving money to giant biotech firms that can make billions or even trillions putting the cattle industry out of business by replacing our food with synthetic garbage, maybe they should look at regenerative cattle ranching instead. Even the media accepts this. From CNBC report on regenerative agriculture that was published a few months ago, quote, "These cattle ranchers are raising better beef, spending less, and reducing carbon emissions. When someone as respected for not spreading misinformation according to the powers that shouldn't be says it must be true, right? Or is that only when they do it in a way that goes along with the narrative?" Think about that for a second. From the article, quote, "When Gabe Brown first got into regenerative agriculture more than 25 years ago, he wasn't trying to solve the thermometer problem. I was just trying to keep the banker at bay and feed my family," Brown told CNBC. Today, Brown runs his 6,000-acre ranch near Bismarck with regenerative practices and helps run a consulting company, Understanding Ag, which consults with farmers managing 32 million acres across North America. While Brown didn't set out to combat the thermometer problem, regenerative cattle grazing is a way of sequestering carbon dioxide, a critical component of limiting the thermometer problem. Cattle who graze on the land eat plants that have absorbed carbon dioxide from the air. After grazing, the cows don't graze the land for a long time, giving the roots a chance to grow another layer of leaves, capturing more carbon. This process sequesters more carbon than feeding cows from typical monocultural crops like corn, because those crops are annual and grow fairly slowly and don't perform photosynthesis when they're lying fallow. The amount of carbon sequestered with regenerative grazing practices varies significantly depending on how well a farmer is grazing the cattle and how diverse the plant species are in the land being grazed. But the range is from 2.5 to 7.5 metric tons of carbon per acre per year, according to Understanding Ag founding partner Alan Williams. By comparison, southern pine forests, which have gotten some attention as a carbon sink, will sequester 1.4 to 2 tons of carbon per acre per year, end quote. So yes, regenerative ranching is 5 times as efficient as this on average. And it is a more complicated practice than this, but what it is in practice is returning to methods of ranching that our ancestors would have recognized before the advent of large-scale industrial cattle operations, which are dehumanizing, by the way, back when most meat you ate was produced locally by your neighbor. And that is what the powers that shouldn't be are most afraid of. People returning to something more holistic, a more holistic relationship with each other, something more directly connected to the land, a way of life that honors both human beings, the land, and nature or God or what have you. What they fear, what they cannot have under any circumstances, are the consequences of a return to this more traditional way of living, the development of a real sense of community, of subsidiarity, and solidarity between families, between neighbors, and in the community itself, and less reliance on broad, complicated systems that the sign of the slightest sniffle break down, causing shortages that can have ripple effects on an unnecessarily complicated economic system for many years, as we're seeing now. If there really is the problem they say that we're having with thermometer and carbon and the rest of it, then the powers that shouldn't be would support regenerative ranching and regenerative agriculture more broadly speaking. Instead, they push fake data that claims cattle ranching is responsible for the most carbon of any sector of the agricultural industry, which is nonsense. It's not only stupid, it's a big lie, a big fat lie that they keep repeating and people keep believing. And unfortunately, we have to support our local ranchers just to give them a chance at fighting back and keeping their heads above water during this time when their costs are compounding and skyrocketing. All those costs you're feeling at the store and at the pump, they're feeling too. This is all happening while regulations are increasing and while misanthropic plant-based zealots are using lawfare to try to put the meat industry out of business. So yes, these stories matter. The actions of governments and would-be governments matter in all of this. So keep an eye on the people running for office on this issue, regardless of your politics. This problem crosses partisan boundaries. Believe me, I've looked at this. Are you surprised that the head of the government is pushing a meat cloning program? Because that's what this is. Are you surprised that they want nothing to do with regenerative agriculture? Let me know in the comments, please. Like and subscribe if you haven't. It really does help, as does sharing this stuff on social media. That helps a lot as well. And as always, I'm Anthony Stine, and thank you for watching today.